There's a guy who's defending at the highest level of the NBA this season, and for some weird reason, he's not getting any DPOY buzz, and I'm talking about no other than the most disrespected star of this generation, Rudy Gobert. Rudy Gobert single-handedly making the Minnesota Timberwolves a great defense this season. There's zero way that a team that consists of all pretty bad or average at best defenders outside of like 2 or 3 guys should ever be a top 8 defense in the NBA. But that's exactly what the Minnesota Timberwolves are, and it's quite literally all due to Rudy Gobert. And proof of that is in the on-off. With Rudy Gobert on the floor, the Wolves have a defensive rating of 110.5, which are ranked 3rd in the entire NBA. But when Rudy Gobert is off the floor, that number drops to 118.7, which are ranked 26th in the NBA. And this is due to various defensive reasons that all tie together and make Rudy one of the greatest defensive anchors in NBA history. There hasn't been many guys who compare length, timing, and position as well as Rudy can, and positioning is one of, in my opinion, the most important traits to have as a defensive anchor. It's what makes everything come together, and Rudy might be the best at this. Take this play for instance versus Orlando Magic. Paolo blows by Randle, so Rudy steps up in the middle of the key and help, takes away any option he has at the rim, which forced Paolo to look to make a pass, so Rudy turned his body almost at the same time to face Paolo, and Rudy goes from a rim protector to essentially a perimeter defender and gets his hand on a pass, which led to a steal. And this is all set up by Rudy being able to be in a position to make a play. And when you pair position with motor, it becomes that much more dangerous. And you can argue no defender's fingerprints are all over the team's defense like Rudy Gobert's are. He's top 7 in shots contested, and he's in pretty much every action defensively. These two plays in the same quarter versus the Denver Nuggets are great examples of this. Jokic gets by Randle off a cut. Rudy steps up and forces a drop down pass, immediately reacts to it, and this is just great patience and timing. 9 times out of 10, most guys would have either reacted too late, leading to an open dunk, or they would have jumped too early and gotten a foul call. Same thing here versus the Chicago Bulls. Look at the number of things Rudy Gobert is doing. He guarded the screen, was ready for the backdoor cut, closed out on the shooter, recovered, walled him up, forced a pass, and he raced the layup attempt off the cut. Gobert constantly being in the right spots and having the motor to utilize his position and length at all times is such a valuable trait, and that's a large reason why there's consistently such a large drop-off between him being on and off the court, because most players simply cannot do what Rudy Gobert can do on the defensive side of the ball. And when it comes to the narrative of Rudy Gobert, you always hear how he's so-called food and space and how he's a liability and things like that, but that just couldn't be further from the truth. Amongst players who have guarded 150 isolations this season, Rudy Gobert is first in the entire NBA in lowest points allowed per ISO with .78, which for a center is absolutely ridiculous. And every year, Rudy Gobert is at the top of these lists, but for some reason, people do not care about them and they just continue to run with the narratives. And one thing that makes Rudy so great in space is that he essentially guards angles rather than guarding the ball handler. Whenever you watch centers get cooked in space, most times it's due to them trying to guard straight up, so they aren't able to obviously do that, so it's an easy blow by, or they just get to their spots for an easy open 3-pointer or mid-range. But for Rudy, he just stays calm and lets the ball handler decide what he wants to do with it. His only goal is to either take away your 3-pointer or sort of bait you into driving, which then he's able to get a good contest or block your shot. And this is all made possible by him understanding his length and knowing the distance he can get away with in certain defensive positions. And recovery is also one of the more underrated parts of his game, as it allows him to go from vulnerable defensive spots to instantly being able to make a play. This play versus the Rockets is a good example of this. Game on the line, KD's ISO and Rudy Gobert, and just look at the position Rudy Gobert is in. 1 foot is off the ground, his body is in a terrible spot. 9.9 times out of 10, if you're in that spot, you're done, but not for Rudy Gobert. He somehow recovers in a half a second to get a game-saving block, and of course, knowing Rudy Gobert, he wasn't even done with that. He had to get a deflection as well, and that's just vintage Rudy Gobert. Similar position versus the Suns. Jalen Green in space crosses over. Once again, Rudy's in a bad spot, but it does not matter. He stays patient, understands his length, and recovers to smear it off the backboard. And again, this is just vintage Rudy Gobert. Rudy's also holding players to 55% at the rim this season, which is the same number that Victor Wembyanama is holding players to. And Wemby is a very strong candidate for DPOY, but based on everything that should be taken into consideration when making the award, I truly do not get how Rudy Gobert isn't at least right there with him, rather than being a massive underdog to win the award, as he's playing defense at a near flawless level this season, and he's arguably having the best defensive year of his legendary career. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know if you agree or disagree with anything in this video, and have a great day.